June 12, 1944, Normandy, France. Rain falls over a shattered land, mud, smoke, and steel. Inside an American Sherman tank, young Sergeant David Monroe waits. Engine rumbling beneath him, heart pounding in the dark. Across the fields, German Panthers prowl, bigger, faster, deadlier. Their commander laughs. Children's toys, he calls the Shermans. But what he doesn't know is that behind every one of those toys stands a factory that never sleeps, a supply line that never ends, and a nation that builds faster than anyone can destroy.
June 12, 1944, Normandy, France. The rain falls soft and steady over the shattered countryside. Smoke drifts through the hedgerows where the air smells of oil, cordite, and damp earth. Somewhere beyond the fog, engines rumble, deep, rhythmic, relentless. Through the cracked lens of a periscope, Sergeant David Monroe watches the fields ahead from inside his M4 Sherman tank. Mud streaks the hull, the steel trembling with the steady heartbeat of the engine beneath him. Around him, his crew waits in silence, the loader clutching a shell, the driver gripping the controls, everyone listening for that one sound that could mean death, the crack of a German cannon. On the other side of those fields, Panther tanks prowl, sleek and deadly. Their commander, Hauptmann Kurt Riener, stares through his sights and smirks. To him, these American Shermans are jokes, children's toys. He calls them thinly armored, underpowered, built for quantity, not quality. But what Riener doesn't know, what no one in Germany yet understands, is that this toy is about to become a nightmare. Because behind every Sherman lies a factory that never sleeps, a supply line that never ends, and a nation that builds faster than anyone can destroy. The Germans laughed at the Sherman. By the end of the war, they'd be running from it. A toy tank, the birth of a legend. June 12, 1944, Normandy, France. Rain drizzles across the hedgerows as dawn breaks over a battered countryside. Mud clings to the boots of Sergeant David Monroe, a 24-year-old tank commander from Ohio, as he peers through the periscope of his M4 Sherman. The engine hums beneath him, steady, impatient, alive. Ahead, a narrow road snakes through low fields still littered with the ruins of the previous day's fighting. Somewhere beyond those hedgerows, German Panthers wait like predators. Inside the tank, the air is thick with sweat and the smell of oil. Corporal Jenkins loads another high-explosive shell into the 75 gun, muttering under his breath, "If they hit us first, we're toast." Monroe doesn't respond. He knows Jenkins isn't wrong. They all know the rumors that the German tanks are bigger, tougher, and far deadlier. The men joke about it sometimes, calling their Sherman a Ronson because it lights up every time it's hit. But this morning, there's no laughter. Only the sound of rain on steel and the rumble of engines waiting for the signal to move. Across the line, German Panzer Commander Hauptmann Kurt Riener scans the same gray horizon from his Panther. He's heard reports that the Americans have landed hundreds of tanks, all M4 Shermans pouring onto the beaches. Children's toys, he scoffs to his gunner. Built for parades, not war. His crew laughs, their confidence anchored in the Panther's thick frontal armor and high-velocity 75 cannon. In their eyes, the Sherman isn't a threat, it's target practice. But what Riener doesn't know, what few Germans yet understand, is that the real strength of the Sherman isn't in any single tank. It's in the sheer number of them, the relentless flow of fresh machines and men that never seems to stop. Every time a Sherman burns, two more arrive. Every time a unit is wiped out, another replaces it before dusk. This unstoppable tide began years earlier in a Detroit factory with an argument between an old engineer and a young upstart named Walter Olson. It was 1941, and the U.S. Army was desperate for a new tank design that could be built quickly and in huge numbers. Traditional armor construction relied on rivets, small metal fasteners that held steel plates together. It was slow, costly, and worse, dangerous. When a riveted tank was hit, the rivets could shear off and ricochet inside the hull, turning into deadly shrapnel. Olson, then only 29, proposed something radical, welding the armor plates instead of riveting them. The older engineers at the American Locomotive Company laughed him out of the room. Welding, they argued, was too risky. It could weaken the metal, distort the frame, and lead to catastrophic failures in combat. One veteran designer reportedly told him, "Son, you don't weld tanks, you bolt them like men have done since the Great War." But Olson refused to back down. He spent nights in the workshop testing new alloys and welding techniques borrowed from shipbuilding and bridge design. His idea was simple but revolutionary. Welds would make the hull lighter, stronger, and faster to produce. If perfected, it could cut tank construction time in half or more. He finally got a chance to prove himself in early 1942 when the first prototype welded hull passed ballistic testing. Shells that would normally pop rivets like popcorn simply bounced or cratered harmlessly. The Army's inspection team was stunned. Not only was the tank sturdier, it was cheaper to build and could roll off the assembly line in days instead of weeks. By 1943, American factories from Detroit to Pittsburgh were roaring with the sound of welders. Sparks lit the factory floors like fireworks as thousands of Sherman hulls took shape. The M4 was never meant to outgun the Germans, it was meant to outlast them. For every Tiger built in Germany, the US could build 20 Shermans. And now, on the muddy fields of Normandy, that strategy was about to be tested. Monroe hears the whistle. "Move out!" The tank jolts forward, treads biting into the earth. Behind him, dozens of other Shermans crawl through the mist in formation, an iron wave rolling eastward. German officers may have mocked them, but the men inside these steel beasts know something their enemies don't yet understand. America's tanks aren't just machines, they're a message. A message written in steel, speed, and sheer unstoppable numbers. Fire and Steel, the baptism of the Sherman. June 13, 1944, near Villers-Bocage, France. The hedgerows of Normandy have turned into a labyrinth of death. Narrow lanes and high earthen walls turn every bend into an ambush. Sergeant Monroe's Sherman crawls through the overgrown path, its engine low and steady as a thin mist rises from the wet soil. Every creak, every rustle of leaves sounds like danger. Eyes sharp, Monroe murmurs, peering through his periscope. The morning fog hides everything but also everyone. Suddenly, the stillness shatters. A flash. A deafening crack. The lead Sherman erupts in flame, hit straight through the hull by an armor-piercing round. The explosion rattles Monroe's tank like an earthquake. Jenkins yells, "Panther, 11 o'clock," and slams another shell into the breach. The gunner swivels the turret, heart pounding. Range 400 yards. On target. Fire. The Sherman's 75 cannon booms, the recoil slamming through the hull. Smoke fills the interior, acrid and sharp. The shell bounces off the Panther's sloped armor with a metallic scream. "No effect," Jenkins shouts. "Reload." The German tank fires again, the round punches through another Sherman, setting it ablaze. The heat is visible even through the periscope, a blinding orange inferno spilling smoke into the sky. Monroe's men know their tank is outmatched. They can't win a stand-up duel, not against that armor, not with this gun. But retreat isn't an option. Monroe calls out, "Gunner, high explosive, hedgerow left flank." The cannon roars again, this time smashing into the brush beside the Panther. Dirt and branches explode into the air. It's not a kill, it's a distraction. The Panther swivels its turret to reacquire. That's when Monroe hits the intercom. "Driver full speed right side, go go go." The Sherman lurches forward, tracks tearing into mud as it bursts from cover and swings wide around the hedgerow. Monroe spots a narrow ditch, a flank route. He takes it. The Panther's gun fires again, a near-miss, soil sprays across the hull like rain. Jenkins breathes fast, his hands trembling over the next shell. Monroe grips the periscope tight, scanning for weakness. The Panther looms broadside for just a moment, its turret still turning. "Now," Monroe shouts. The Sherman's gun barks. The shell slams into the Panther's thinner side armor, a blinding flash, a plume of fire, and the German tank stops moving. Its turret droops. Monroe exhales, chest heaving. Good hit," Jenkins laughs shakily, pounding the breech door. "They said this thing couldn't kill a Panther." Outside, the field is chaos. Burning tanks, churning mud, and columns of black smoke twisting into the morning sky. The radio crackles with half-heard orders and frantic voices. Across Normandy, thousands of similar clashes unfold. The Sherman, derided and underestimated, is proving it can do far more than anyone believed. But even as American crews fight tooth and nail, the Germans remain confident. For every Panther destroyed, they field others. For every Sherman hit, they assume the Americans will falter. What they don't see, what they can't comprehend, is the machinery behind the front. While Rayner's tank burns in Normandy, half a world away in Michigan, welders are already shaping the steel for its replacement. In massive plants like the Detroit Tank Arsenal, the production lines never stop. Sparks dance under the catwalks as newly welded hulls roll out one after another, 30 tons of steel apiece, painted olive green, stamped M4. At the height of production, one Sherman rolls off the line every 30 minutes. That's more than 50 a day, 1,500 a month. German factories can't even dream of that scale. The Tiger tanks, though mighty, are handcrafted monsters built slowly and expensively. The Sherman is the opposite, the tank of the modern world. Each one is a piece of an unstoppable system, a war machine powered by the hands of mechanics, welders, and ordinary Americans who have never seen Europe, yet are changing its fate. Back in Normandy, Monroe's unit moves on, leaving the smoking wrecks behind. The men are quiet, shaken, but alive. They've learned something vital today, not just about courage, but about persistence. The Sherman may not be perfect, but it's enough. And when you have enough, when you have tens of thousands, perfection isn't the point anymore. It's victory. The machine that won by numbers. August 1944, Red Ball Express route, northern France. The roads are alive. Convoys of trucks, half-tracks, and Shermans roar eastward in an endless line that stretches beyond the horizon. The air smells of diesel and dust. Engines thunder day and night, headlights blazing through blackout curtains, carrying food, ammunition, and fuel to the front. This is the Red Ball Express, the lifeline of the Allied advance, feeding Patton's Third Army as it races across France. And at the heart of it all, the Sherman tanks keep rolling. In the commander's cupola of one of those Shermans sits Sergeant Monroe, now a veteran of 3 months of constant fighting. His crew is exhausted, faces gaunt, uniforms caked in grime, but their machine still runs like the day it rolled off the ship at Omaha. Every bolt, every weld, every turn of the treads is proof of the factories that built it and the people who refuse to slow down. "Hard to believe they called this thing a toy," Jenkins mutters, staring at the horizon. Ahead lies the Seine River and beyond it, Paris. The crew has heard stories over the radio, German officers baffled at how quickly the Allies are replacing lost tanks. Where a Tiger might take months to repair, a damaged Sherman can be stripped for parts, patched up, and returned to battle within days. American supply depots overflow with spare engines, guns, and treads. Even the ammunition is standardized. One shell fits every M4 in Europe. That's what makes it unstoppable. When General George S. Patton's armored divisions spearhead the breakout from Normandy, the Germans expect them to slow after a few days. Instead, they accelerate. Shermans lead the charge, tearing down roads, smashing through hedgerows, crossing bridges that heavier tanks could never risk. German fuel reserves are dwindling. American ones refilled daily. Everywhere they go, German officers mutter the same thing: how is it possible? The answer lies in the way America fights its wars, with logistics, not luck. For every Sherman on the battlefield, there's a dozen men keeping it alive: mechanics, truck drivers, welders, crane operators, cooks. Behind the front, entire towns have been converted into mobile repair depots. A tank that limps in damage today could roll back out tomorrow, freshly painted and battle-ready. By late summer, entire German divisions are being cut off, overwhelmed by forces that just don't stop coming. At one captured command post near Chartres, Monroe's unit finds stacks of German intelligence reports. One catches his eye: it's a briefing written by a Wehrmacht colonel. American tanks inferior in armor and gunpowder, yet they attack relentlessly. Destroy one column and two appear. Their supply is endless. We can destroy their machines, but not their factories. Monroe folds the paper, tucking it into his pocket. It's more than just an observation, it's a prophecy. The industrial strength behind the Sherman is doing what bullets can't: breaking German morale. But there's another kind of battle happening, one that doesn't involve shells or armor. Back in Detroit, Walter Olson, the engineer who first championed welded hulls, stands on the factory floor, watching the line of completed tanks move toward the rail yard. A supervisor hands him a telegram, a short, simple message from France. Sherman's performing beyond expectations, welds holding under combat stress. God bless your team. He smiles quietly, wiping soot from his hands. His reckless idea, the one veterans mocked as dangerous, is now saving lives and winning battles. Every tank that rolls off the line carries a story, not of a single hero, but of a nation that learned how to fight with steel and science. Welded seams hold not just the plates of armor together, but the hopes of thousands of men counting on their machines to bring them home. And now those machines are rolling toward Germany. The mockery is over, the laughter has stopped. Even hardened German officers, veterans of the Eastern Front, are beginning to realize the truth. The Sherman isn't a joke, it's a tidal wave. It doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to arrive. And it always does. Through fire and iron, the tide turns east. December 20th, 1944, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow falls in heavy silence over the pines. The white landscape seems peaceful until the earth begins to shake, distant artillery thunders echoing through the frozen hills. In the valley below, the Battle of the Bulge has begun. Sergeant Monroe's Sherman sits half-buried in snow beside a narrow road, its engine idling low, steam curling from the exhaust. Inside, the crew huddles in heavy coats, breath fogging in the cold air. They've been awake for 2 days straight, fighting to hold the line against a surprise German offensive. The enemy is throwing everything they have left, Panthers, Tigers, and desperate infantry, in one final bid to break through. Jenkins wipes frost from the periscope and mutters, "They just don't quit." Monroe replies, "Neither do we." Through the white haze, dark shapes emerge, German armor advancing. The lead Panther's cannon flashes and a shell screams past, exploding in the snow behind them. Monroe shouts, "Reverse, take cover behind the ridge." The Sherman jerks backward, treads churning ice. The snow muffles everything but the sound of its engine, that deep, steady roar that somehow feels alive. They find a low embankment and stop. The gunner lines up the shot as the German tanks crest the hill. "Steady!" The cannon booms. The first shell hits the lead Panther's track, not a kill, but enough to cripple it. Smoke pours out as the German crew scrambles to bail. Another Sherman joins the fight from the tree line, then another. Soon, a dozen of them are firing in concert, not elegant, not perfect, but relentless. The battlefield erupts in flame and smoke, flashes lighting the snow like lightning. From his Panther farther back, Hauptmann Kurt Riener watches in disbelief. Months ago, he'd called these American machines toys. Now he sees them everywhere, swarming through the fog, coordinated, fearless. Each time his crews destroy one, 2 more appear from the woods like phantoms. His radio crackles with frantic reports. "Panther 3 disabled. We're surrounded. They're flanking from the south." Riener clenches his jaw. "It's impossible, they can't have this many." But they do. All across the Ardennes, the Shermans grind forward through the snow, their welded hulls shrugging off shrapnel, their tracks cutting through frozen mud. When one breaks down, another tows it. When one burns, another takes its place. Supply trucks rumble in behind them with fuel and ammunition, never stopping, never resting. For the Germans, this battle is a cruel revelation, the full weight of American industry brought to bear on a single front. While the Tiger remains a masterpiece of engineering, it's too few, too delicate, too late. The Sherman, once mocked as crude, has become the embodiment of endurance. In a brief lull, Monroe steps outside his tank, the snow crunching beneath his boots. He watches a column of reinforcements arrive, hundreds of Shermans, their engines growling through the storm. The sight is surreal. The white hills glow orange from the fires of burning armor. In the distance, he hears the low hum of aircraft, P-47 Thunderbolts sweeping in to strafe the retreating German lines. Monroe looks at his tank, dented, scorched, but alive. "You're still kicking," he murmurs, patting the welded side armor. "Guess that engineer back home knew what he was doing." By dawn, the German assault begins to falter. The last great counterattack of the Reich is collapsing under the weight of the same machine they once dismissed. Riener's Panther is hit during the retreat, immobilized, its engine burning. As he climbs out into the snow, he sees a Sherman cresting the ridge, its white star shining faintly beneath a coat of frost and soot. For the first time, he feels something unexpected: respect. The machine that was once the subject of laughter now dominates the battlefield. Its crews, young men like Monroe, have carried it through mud, fire, and snow. Its factories have turned steel and sweat into victory. And as the sun rises over the smoking forests of the Ardennes, it's clear to everyone on both sides, the tank the Germans mocked has become the instrument of their defeat. The Sherman rolls forward once more, tracks biting through the ice, its engine humming like the heart of an empire that refuses to stop beating. The Iron Road to Victory. April 1945, west of the Rhine River, Germany. The thunder of engines rolls across the plains like a heartbeat. Spring rain slicks the black soil and the roads are clogged with armor, endless columns of Shermans advancing east toward the crumbling heart of the Third Reich. Smoke pillars rise on the horizon. German cities burn, factories smolder, bridges lie shattered. What began on the beaches of Normandy now surges across the Rhine like a flood. Sergeant Monroe leans out from the turret, goggles splattered with rain and mud. "Hard to believe we're here," he mutters. Jenkins, his loader, grins beneath his helmet. "Didn't think this toy tank would make it all the way to Germany, huh?" Monroe chuckles, shaking his head. "Guess the joke's on them." The convoy halts near a bombed-out rail junction. The air smells of smoke and diesel. Abandoned panthers and tigers litter the roadside, mechanical carcasses too complex to repair, too slow to escape. Some have been destroyed by airstrikes, others simply left behind when they ran out of fuel. Monroe climbs down and walks past one of the wrecks. Its armor is thick, its gun immense, a masterpiece of German engineering. But it's lifeless, too heavy, too expensive, too rare. He runs his hand over the blackened steel and murmurs, "You were built to win duels, we were built to win wars." Nearby, American engineers are already at work bridging a destroyed river crossing. Welders spark beneath the gray sky, arcs of light dancing over twisted girders, the same kind of light that once filled Detroit's tank factories. Monroe pauses to watch. He can't help but think of the man who started it all, the young engineer Walter Olson, and how one bold decision to weld instead of rivet changed the war's very rhythm. That idea, ridiculed as reckless, made tanks faster to build, stronger under fire, and easier to repair. And now, standing in the ruins of Germany, its consequences are undeniable. The German officers had mocked the Sherman for being too light, too simple, too common, but that was precisely its genius. In war, complexity kills. The Sherman's simplicity, its standard parts, its flexible design meant it could adapt to anything: flamethrower variants, bridge layers, amphibious models, and bulldozers clearing the rubble of war. It was more than a tank. It was an idea that quantity has a quality all its own. As the column prepares to move again, Monroe receives word over the radio. The Allies have crossed the Elbe. The war in Europe is almost over. The Sherman crews can feel it in their bones, victory not as a roar but as a slow, unstoppable grind. Days later, outside a small German village, Monroe's platoon halts when they encounter a group of surrendering Wehrmacht soldiers. Among them is Hauptmann Kurt Riener, the same man who once sneered at the American toy tanks. He approaches with his hands raised, mud on his face, exhaustion in his eyes. Behind Monroe, a dozen Shermans stand in silence, engines humming like iron sentinels. Riener looks up at the machines, their armor patched and scarred, their white stars faded under layers of grime. "You built more of them than we could ever destroy," he says quietly, almost to himself. Monroe nods. "That was the plan." Riener hesitates, then adds, "When the war began, we laughed at your tanks. We thought they were weak." Monroe replies simply, "They didn't have to be stronger, just enough." The rain begins to fall again, soft, steady, cleansing. Around them, the last echoes of battle fade. Around them, the Shermans rest on the roadside, engines cooling. The Shermans rest on the roadside, engines cooling. They will move no more. The war they carried on their shoulders is ending. The war they carried on their shoulders in America's factories, the welders are already laying down their torches. The welders are already laying down their torches. The sky over Detroit are gone, replaced by the hum of peacetime industry. Replaced by the hum of peacetime in every scarred plate of armor, in every soldier who lived because the next tank arrived on time. Because the next tank arrived on time. Then they feared it. The Germans mocked the Sherman. Finally, they were buried beneath it. Then they feared it. The world's mightiest war machine wasn't the biggest or the strongest. War machine it was the one that never stopped the strongest. It was the one that never Sherman, the tank that rolled straight through Europe. The M4 Sherman, the tank that rolled straight through Europe and into history.